Kirem Alois, Nanakim, Kesicha Adoinoi, Adoinoi, Shema Bekoili, Yenazar Gashuva is the Koil Tachnonai, Mavaina is Ishmaya, Adoinoi, Niyamoi, Kim Chaslicha, the man.
Visi Adoinoi kifs nafshi v'ledura yoichal nafshi l'Adoinoi mishayim l'Adoi keshanim l'Adoi yachad Yisrael l'Adoinoi l'Adoinoi achesed v'yabayinoi chedis yivdei es Yisruhai l'koil Adoinoi keep the fathers and all this as why in the ayin yuva yazri Azri, my mother, and I was I know my Lehu, I didn't some Lehu. In I the universe, Shine, Israel. Then the Shemlehu, then it's Yad Nehu. And the Shem is like a kite, I have Lloyd. Then is small, called police. Shea. Oder nicht mit Eis gewesen. So, you can't answer that.
You hear me? Kiva, am I audible?
Yeah.
Kiva?
Go ahead. I put the mic right on. I put the mic on top.
Yeah, we came together to give the Kavod Achron for someone who was from the Akira of our Besmedrit, Akira of the city of Toronto, the Akira of the Talmidim of Torah V'das, Chaim Elazar, Sussman, Oliver Sholem. This week's parsha is the parsha with the Rebbeinu Shem counts Klal Yisrael, the Toichi Boson, because of the love that he has for them. The Rebbeinu Shem counts them again and again. Chazal bring in the beginning of Shemais that the Rebbeinu Shalom counts Klal Yisrael, Chayayim, he counts them b'shmoisam with their names, and also the Mesosam, he counts them again with their names and says their names. They're nimshal kachavim, they're like stars. That Amayna Misbel kachavim, Makolam Shemes Yikra, the Rebbeinu Shalom brings them in, calling their names, and Rebbeinu Shalom takes them out with their name. Chaim Elazar's name is a big name. He's named after the Mincha Rebbe Zachayin Bracha, the Minchas Elazar. He was born with the bracha from the Mincha Rebbe gave his father. Mincha Rebbe was on the train, and Chaim Elazar's father was on the train, and Mincha Rebbe needed a minyan. And he asked him to come to the minyan, and he promised him that if you come to the minyan, I'll give you what you need. So he said, I need a son, a ben Zocher. So he gave him a bracha. And Chaim Elazar's mother became pregnant that time with him. And by the time he was born, the Minchas Elazar was nifter. So they figured since he had the bracha from Minchas Elazar, he got that name. He got the name Chaim Elazar. That's his name. Chaim Elazar is the name of the Mincha Rebbe. Is the Chaim Bracha. The Shema is the shame that he came to the world. The shame, such a shame. The name of the Mincha Rebbe was from the Gedolim Geoinim, the Dar, the Leichmei Hashem, and he came with that name to this world. And he leaves this world with this beautiful Toim Shem Toiv. He leaves with this Shem Toiv, the good name that he has. Everyone who knew Chaim Elazar, I mean, he's such a fine character, such a fine Balmidus, and such a love for learning. The person who had a great mind. There's some Chashiva Talmidim of Torah V'das. I remember by Moishy's Bar Mitzvah, Agon Rabbi Yan Kamenetsky came to the Bar Mitzvah at that time, ran up the stairs, and he told me, so Chaim's Zins Bar Mitzvah, darf ich kommen laufen, ich darf springen. Because because he felt someone who like Chaim Elazar, whose whole life was Ehrlichkeit, Torah, Midas Toivus. That's his whole life, and together with his chashuv wife, he built this beautiful, beautiful mishpacha. His two sons, Moishy Yumi and his daughter, the Cohen family, Shana and the Cohen family. Baruch Hashem, the Yisyalda al Mishpachaisam, that you go, the Yisyalda al Mishpachaisam, you go on the yichus, the yichus that Chaim had from Einikel from Koppel Reich, Agudah of Koppel Reich was the Reich of the Hungarian Jewry, and from the Sussman Sefer family, and Einikel from Pappenheim, from Yisyalda Mishpachaisam, the mishpacha that he has, this chashuv mishpacha that he comes from. The Chazal bring in this week's parsha when the Masa'olam came to a taina why they weren't given the Torah. He said, "Bring me a sefer yichus. Bring me a sefer yichus like my Kol Yisrael brings." Yichus means you're proud of your heritage, and you continue the heritage. That's what Chaim Elazar did. He continued his heritage, continued the Messiah that he had, the Choshev Messiah that he had, the Messiah of Ehrlichkeit, of Derech Yisrael Sova. Ehrlich built this with this Choshev Rebbetzin, who was so dedicated to him. And they lived so many years, Baruch Hashem, together, almost 60 years together, and they built such a beautiful home. And this week's the Haftarah was supposed to be the Haftarah, but not the Chodesh. The Gemara Sakash, it says first that you could count them, and then says you can't count them. So Kam Bezman Shoysen Atzoyin Shamakim, the Gemara answers, when they do the Ratzon Shamakim Pashup Shat, you learn in the Gemara that when you do the Ratzon Shamakim, then it's Lo Yimad L'Yisofar, you can't count them. There's so many. The Kan, the Shein Oisen Atzoyin Shamakim. When they don't do the Ratzon Shamakim, that's when Mispar. So the Chaim asks that the Gemara should have said Kam Bezman Shein Oisen Atzoyin Shamakim. The Gemara says, first Kam Bezman Shoysen Atzoyin Shamakim. So the Chaim says, Shat in the Gemara, Bezman Shoysen Atzoyin Shamakim Mispar, everyone is a count. You count every individual is special. Bezman Shein Atzoyin Shamakim, then there's Lo Yimad Lo Yisofar. They're not individuals. Chaim was one of the Mispar B'nai Yisrael. Chaim Elazar was someone who you could count, somebody who was so chashuv in his ehrlichkeit and his limdus and his limud Torah and his midas toivus and an adracha of the family is hoya mispar. You mina mispar l'kachavim. You count this koich of this beautiful star that came to this world, the star that's known Chaim Elazar came to this world. And someone in our Besmedrish, every time he came running to daven with Minyan, running to learn, running to the Shurim, and even now when he was at home every night, listened to the Shurim, and this was, so I remember when there was a Siyum, a Shas, and he came to the Siyum, and he spoke the few words, beautiful words, that he spoke from the Havas HaTorah and the Havas Yerushalayim. A person like that, when he leaves this world, b'misosim mayne, you count him again. You remember who he was. You remember Toiv Yoim Misosoi Yoim Vivaldoi. When he leaves this world, he leaves it with something that's Toiv, good. His Yoim Mimavus, he came to this world, Chaim accomplished everything he had to accomplish the world in Limud Torah and his Midas Toivus and his Chesed and everything he did. And you see it with the children, Baruch Hashem, the Choshev children. Like the Satmar Rebbe said, the biggest aid is that you could say in a person, look at the children, look at the beautiful children, everyone, Tamid Chachamim, the whole family, Erlich family, and he was Zoche, that his Mamish, Yoim Sosais, near the Yoim Valdai, he just came now 86 years old, it's just me, and the Bain Shalom is in Tmimim, the Bain Shalom, the Misa Sadikim at Tomim, that they're close to Yom Volda, to show us one of the reasons why Banisham shows that the Yom Misa is the same Yom Volda, to show you that his Yom Volda was Choshev and Yom Misosa is Choshev. He left this world, you could say, Chaim left this world with full of Maisim Toivim. Someone went through the Mechama, and Hashem, he and his sister were Nitzel together with their mother, were Nitzel from the Mechama. And I knew his mother, Spenner, Allah Shalom, a Mama from Azan Zin, a Mama from Azan Tochter, a Mama from Azan Kinder, Azan Einiklach. We'll miss him a lot, Chaim. Seeing, just running. I remember when before COVID, the Chaim used to run always to the Shurim, Mesmedish, Shurim, and Baba, run to learn, run to come to Daven, run to do mitzvahs, run to Elokai. And he was from the people who really machshav Torah. So when he leaves this world, we count him. He's accountable in this world. Someone who is accountable for what he did in this world, he accomplished this world. And he was zoicha to such a choshev b'nei bayis, his family, from the choshev family, from the Shar family, from the choshev families, and Rabban should help that he should be a male yosher for his family, for his choshev Rebbetzin, his choshev b'nei bayis, for the choshev children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. He should be a male yosher for Abbas Medrash, be a male yosher for Klal Yisrael. It should be zoicha to see Takemoinim, the Rabban Shem, V'hoy Mitzvah B'nei Yisrael, Poshut is going on when Mashiach will come. Shea is saying the Nevuah of V'hoy Mitzvah B'nei Yisrael, Klal Yisrael will be, every one of Klal Yisrael will be counted, like the Chaim says. That when Mashiach will come, will be zoicha. One of the people that will be Mitzvah will be Chaim Elazar Sussman. One of the people who will be counted there, someone who accomplished so much. I'm sure his Zaydas, the greater Zaydas that he had, are coming to be Mekabel upon him. The Banim should hope that he should be mamlas for Klal Yisrael, that Mishamar, all the sickness should be taken away, should be Zaycha to see the Bibolity and Goyal, to see the Gula B'Meir B'Yameinu.
Mas Be'er of Shabbos, Sima Yufa, Nitzel Mechibet HaKaiva, Chaim, and the Schis. And there's a reason. It was a Miyagaya, the Toyer, Kol Yumov, with the Emesdike Yegia. Chazal say, Megillah, Lomu Koyrim, HaToicheche, before Sheshuna, before Shvias, before Kabudas HaToyre. The answer is Tichle Shunu V'Kileloi Seyu. What does that mean? Avada, we hope. Alle Zuhörer sollen weggehen für jüdische Kinder. Ich bin nicht von der Kolzav der Zikkel. Wir sehen die Kolgerscher in der Beruf, Zwi, das Schiebe V'Chachma Leblin. So, but the limit that a person takes from that, it reminds the person. So get a weckoff for the tachlis, why we're here, what our schaives, ba'olam hazeh, what a person can do, was a can oftin, every moment that we're here, Hashem gives us the koyach, we're able to go to Besmedrish, able to learn, able to daven, with the chavivis, with the chashivas. Chalida v'chas, something goes wrong, the person wakes up, it prepares us to Rosh Hashanah, it prepares us to Kabulas HaTorah, to a new Kabulas HaTorah, to a new Achrayas. We have a new outlook in life when we read the Torah. We don't have to, only read it. It reminds us it's enough. It's enough to bring the person, to elevate the person, and to bring him to a different blick. Kadosh Baruch Hu gives me days in this world. What should I do with these days? With these shuan? Chaim, und da habst du gegeben Zeichen. Jetzt hatte die Schmaie. Chaim hatte emsdike Havune in Teure. Hat gelebt. He was learning of Loi, was gesinnt Menschen. He had a side in the morning, found Mittag, for a few hours, with Chavrise. So hat gekocht. Der emsdike Amkes, man hat sich geschlagen, man hat sich gehargert. Also wie es darf zu sein, wie zwei Jiden lernen. Kol Kilo herangetan in dem Teure mit der Simche. Of Loi is gesinnt Menschen, that he got the name of Chaim Loser. He was neulet from a bruche, from Minkat Sheruf, so eine bruche. He had the schis to Mitzad of the Minyan on the train, and the Minkat Sheruf at the Mungewinschen. And the Zoiche given his father, Rabbi Yomazev, the Zoiche that year, 14 months later, that he was born. They gave him the Numen, Chaim Loser gesehen. One of the Svurim, the Minkat Sheruf, of Teure, steht, Vayukem Avuam, Vayumas Avuam, Vayuvay Avuam Lispoit, Lesuru Velifkoisa, Vayukem Avuam, my Alpenai Maisoi, Vayidabel, my Chais Laimlet. The Teure is starting to tell you that Avum Vini came to say a hesped on Surah Imaini. And the Torah goes away right away. Vayukam Avuam Alpnai Maisa, and he starts talking a deal, how to make a deal with the Abba Maya Shekel Kesef, with the B'nai Chais to have a kaveh. The Torah doesn't mention one word. What was that hesped? What did he say at that hesped? The Minkat Shruf bringt that he heard from his father, the Shem, his grandfather, the Shem Shloime, of Shloime the Minkatche. Was a grandchild from the B'nai Yissaschar. His father was a Bluzer in Azin from the B'nai Yissaschar. But the Shem Shloime, when his Rebbetzin passed away, he said the following words on the Impusik. What did he say then? He said, Vayukam Avuam, my al Panai Maisa. The Gemara sucht im Sechtes Bruches. Nushim B'ma Zachin. What is the schis HaTorah that the Nushim have, the ladies have? They don't have a mitzvah of a limit HaTorah. So the Gemara sucht, the Akren, unique Levaya Kenishte, they bring the children to Torah, the Notren, the Gevrai ad Usame by Kenishte. They wait for their husbands, they send their husbands to the Smedrish to learn. And they wait for them by Naim Kaloyos with Simcha, with appreciation that my husband is sitting in the Smedrish and learning. What Shem Shloime gesucht on himself. It was Oiche, the Minkat Sheruf, with them Gudel Ba'anukim. He gesucht, Yispoit, what was the hesped, Vayukam Avuam Lispot Lesura Velifkoisa, as Vayukam Avuam, Tekima Hoisuloi, the godless that Abu Mavini was Oiche, is my al penai maisoi. That's for because of the nifteres surah imaini. And how I'm saying it now a little bit on a different way, just the opposite. Chaim hat solche gewähnt. Za'aishes Chaim, Mrs. Sussman. She was at his side with chizik and support to his ahabas hatoyre. She gave him the chiyas to be able to come and to enjoy all these years, limita Teure, from Davenen, the lechtige heilige middes that Rabbi Loi mentions, Shayef Ayel, Shayef Nufik, the Machzik Tevisa, the Nafshai. He came to Besmedrish. He didn't expect anything. He didn't come in Bus mod gesucht. Gewinnt a zufriedene, a freiliche, Meile. It brings simcha to the surroundings around him. They were Zoiche together, the Budel Chaim, the Gadol, and the lechtige kinderlich, Moishy Yumi, and the Bas Yechide, Kohn, Mishpachas Kohn, und der Eibischte Held von der Schizel Meigen sein, der Chaim sein, der Schliach, der Klal Yisrael, zwischen Tichle, Schuene, Wikille, Seyu, Bechol, Prutem, mit Prutem, es soll sich unheiben, Huchheil, Schuene, Wikille, Seyu, mit solchen Sachen, zur heiligen Jante, in Kabul ist Teure, in Jerusalem, ihrer Kodesh, in Billa, Moves, Lunetzach, in Bura, Hashem Dimo, mal Kol, Punem, Benoima, Umay.
I'm not the speaker in the family. That's my brother Moishy always has been. So I'll go first. This is not something, you ever can prepare for. When I sat down to collect my thoughts and try to put a pen to paper, you realize it's probably best to just, you're not writing a speech. You're just saying what comes to mind about someone that I was able to call my father for the past 48 years. In this week's Pirkei Avos, it says, Adam, Adam kesef like kesef leizav leivan tavis margalis elav tayru masum tayvim bavad. You're not taking all the fine things in the world that you accumulated. It's what you looked at is what's malav you is tayru masum tayvim. That's what it's about. That's what my father was about. My father was one of the most unassuming people you could ever meet in an amazing way. He was dignified, regal, always looked put together, even in the later years, especially with my mother. She took his help. And especially during COVID, Mommy always made sure he looked perfect. The last few months of his life, he was going to dialysis. He went in a fresh press shirt, just always, I don't know many 85-year-olds, that looked as good as my father. Why was this? It wasn't because he was worried about, looking handsome. It was because he understood that's what a yid is about, the appearance, the tzur of a yid. That's what it's part of. Father understood that we're not like the rest of the world. My father knew that we were prestigious and elevated people, and that is how he lived. My father was immaculate. His haircut, laugh about it. He always wanted to make sure it was perfect. Again, not because he cared how people looked at him in terms of he had to look handsome, but because my father knew this is how we had to walk around. We're special. The last phone call that I had with him about 10 weeks ago, a few days before he fell and he got stitches in his forehead. And he was talking to me on the phone. He said he felt bad. He's going to have a terrible scar. I wanted to look, right. I remember saying, Daddy, at least at 85, you'll be able to walk around worrying about a scar. Not everyone's able to, to get to this age to have a scar to worry about. Baruch Hashem, we're here. And that was part of the last conversation that we had. He was regal. He was a gadol. When I was a child, I wasn't one who, my siblings can attest to this, who sat still for too long. But every night, whether I wanted to or not, my father would learn with me. My report cards that I got, which were good, were his report cards. It was not just learning with the father. I was learning with the Ben Torah and I got the Torah. I may have not understood it back then, but as I got older, I learned to appreciate it. I have no question that my boys today, who are sitting and learning and steiging, comes from Zaidi. Every time we'd come to Toronto, the Yontif, in the summer, whatever it was, he always made a point to learn with my boys. It was a highlight of the time that he would spend with them. He also played chess with them, tried to play a little hockey, but the learning was what he wanted to see. He wanted to see, tell me something, let's sit down, let's learn for a few minutes, just like he did with me. The grandchildren, the Inkluk was pride and joy. He was a father that was also always around with us, spend time with us from everything, besides for Torah, just, the basics of being a child. We used to go tobogganing in Orbel parks, and he didn't just send us down the hill like I send my kids. He used to sit down on the wooden toboggan, go down with us, and many other memories that are now just, a blur as we slowly recall them. From where he came from and what he went through as a child, losing his own father at a young age, It was not an easy beginning, yet with his mother and sister, they got past it and all built a beautiful future. He was born in Budapest in 1937, and then after spending a few months at the end of the war in Bergen-Belsen, they went to Switzerland for a few years, and then ended up in Toronto. A lot of children back then who went through what he went through, unfortunately didn't end up going to learn in yeshiva full time. But my grandmother, Shalom, at a young age, sent him off to To Kevura, and after just a few years there, under Yaakov, as I've mentioned, he earned smicha. And prior to that, he also was selected to be the valedictorian. And not to mention names, but in his shir back then in the early 50s, the early mid-50s, there were some bachrim that went on to become big recognized names in Gedalim and Klal Yisrael. And when they offered it to him, he said right away, "Why me?" And one particular person who became a big Adol of Klal Yisrael, he said, "You should have to give it to this person. He deserves it more than me." And they said, "No, you're the one that earned it, and you deserve it." He never wanted, it wasn't about him. He never wanted attention. He always was, let them have the spotlight. I don't deserve it. Later years, when he retired, at one point, he was earning 3 starim a day. Something when I sat in yeshiva, I barely made it through. Morning, he was by Shea KOLLEL. So Shea explained what it was about, when it was about with him. The fire, the Charusa for a bunch of years, Benny Finkel, thank you. And then in the afternoon, David Hofstetter, come to his share. Another highlight of the day, that was second Seder. And then for the past 17 years, Finkel's Daf Yomi. Wouldn't miss it for the world. All of you were something special, people he loved being around and cherished time with all of you. If the Neil, your share was a highlight of every evening for the past 17 years. Past 3 years, Rabbi Neil kept the Zoom call going just for my father. The only outing during COVID he had in the last 3 years was to the Siyum that Rabbi Neil made in his house in December. And we came in for it. And my father actually, a couple nights before, decided he put together a speech. He wanted to speak. He was surprised at the time, but he wanted to. And he was there that whole night. He smiled the whole night. And then when we got home also, the happiness and simcha on his face, something I hadn't seen for a long time like that. Again, simcha revolved around Torah. That's what it was about. Thank you, Rabbi Neil, for everything you did. My father, as a person, if he took a survey, I don't think you could find a person who would say that they ever heard him say a bad word about someone. At the Shabbos table and coming together, gossip was not his thing. He asked someone if they ever had a fight or witnessed them having a disagreement. I think you'd be hard pressed to find that also. He was a true gadol, and it was never about him. He'd walk away from anything that would be anything about that. Coming from Budapest and starting over, Daddy and Mommy, you see that today that many grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Baruch Hashem, that are because of both of you. My father didn't do it without my mother, and my mother didn't do it without my father. It was a team every day. Daddy, Mommy, you built a beautiful legacy that are following in your footsteps, and you have a lot to be proud of, Mommy, in this world, and Daddy, you're still going to see it every day. I have no doubt that in Shemayim, fathers going to have prime seats next to some other great people who achieve greatness in this world. Living a mere few hundred miles away these past few months, now, never thought of it, but it was a little too far. I want to especially thank my brother Moishy for the countless hours that you spent. My father, my mother, in the hospital. I was here back and forth sometimes. The few days that I spent was a lot for me, I'm saying, but every day, every single day, and taking care of all the arrangements and everything. Thank you, Moishy. And Shani, my big sister, also spent more weeks than me here as well. Rabbi Lacheski, giving up Yantif to be here. Also, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And my father should to continue his greatness. And see much nice from all of us.
When I sat down last night to try to collect my thoughts to think, what should I talk about today? There was a certain phrase that was kind of flashing across my mind, which was, my father's life really wasn't supposed to be, if you think about it. He was 6 years old, Budapest, Hungary, 1944. The Nazis came, and my father, my grandmother, and my sister, Benji's mother, who's here today, thank you, Benji, were taken to Bergen-Belsen. Unfortunately, my grandfather, my father's father, wasn't with them, and he did not end up surviving the war. A few months later, through the Yad Hashem, they Baruch Hashem were able to survive, and then went to Switzerland in 1945. Over there, they were there for 3 years. While they were there, they met, my grandmother met my grandfather, Mr. Penner, and he had 2 daughters, Mrs. Arbach and Mrs. Shields, who's here today. She's in the other room there. She's here, my father's 2 sisters. And 1948, 3 years later, they came to Toronto. My father was 11 years old. The way I've been told the story is apparently the day after his bar mitzvah, he was on his way on a train to go to Torah Vidas. When I asked my grandmother about it at one time, after everything that went on, you're finally here, you're safe, you're in Toronto, your kids are here, everything's good. How could you possibly send them away? And she looked at me almost incredulously, did not understand the question. So what do you mean? There was no yeshiva here. As if like there wasn't a second option. He had to go. He was still in grade 8. He wasn't even in yeshiva age at that time. And off he went. And about 5 years later, as my brother mentioned, he was valedictorian. And a few years after that, he was Zeichet Smicha from 2 of the Gedolei Hadar, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky and Rav Gedalia Shor, Zeichet Tzadik Levachos. As I said, none of this was supposed to happen. That script he wrote, even in those few short years, honestly doesn't seem to even make sense that that would be possible, but that was the script that my father wrote. But he was just getting started. Because then after that, a little while later, met my mother. They got married, 3 children, 15 grandchildren, countless great-grandchildren, each and every one of them Shem Torah u'mitzvahs, following in his wonderful ways. That was the masterpiece that my father painted. So what I was thinking about is, okay, that was his wonderful example. We can all see this, and we as children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren can actually watch this. But what was that example? What was really that about? And there were 4 things that came to mind that I'd like to share. Of course, there's many more, but I'd like to make 4 quick points, if I may, about my father. And the truth is, I first thought I'm going to go into Pirkei Avos and maybe pull out a couple of mishnahs to mention a couple of midas and characteristics. But then I decided not to do that because I felt that if you read through Pirkei Avos, every single midah taiva, that's my father. So if I only picked out 2, I felt I really wouldn't be doing him justice. I said, you know what, I'm not going to mention it, just he encompasses everything. And so the first thing I want to mention, which my brother did touch on as well, is Lashon Hara. I don't like speaking about others, I'll speak about myself. I certainly try my best, but who doesn't succumb to saying a good shtickle Lashon Hara, some good gossip, hearing some good gossip? We try our best, but that's still what happens. Not my father. I've never met a person in my life who literally, honestly did not care to hear about anyone. We would be talking and he would look at us and say, why do I care to hear a story about someone that I don't know? And even if I do know them, why would I care anyways? I still don't care. It was almost as if you watched him, the Yetzer Hara had literally given up and just walked away. But the truth is, of course, no one gets to that level. It doesn't work like that. What happened was, obviously, my father over the years had worked on himself so much that he actually reached that point. The Lashon Hara was really, as my brother said, it just wasn't a thing. It wasn't his thing at all. And literally, when it got later years, I literally felt that the Yetzer Hara for Lashon Hara at some point had looked at him and said, I'm out. I give up. I'm going to go bother other people because I know I'm wasting my time here. And that was one aspect of my father that really stood out, literally from the age that I was old enough to understand it. The second aspect of my father is his midas. I think if you ask anyone who ever met my father, they will all say the exact same thing about him. They will all say that he's the finest person you will ever meet. his Feinkeit, his Edelkeit, never about him, always about everyone else. That's who he was. That was his whole essence, and that's exactly what he literally did every single day. He was a walking Musar Sefer. When you read the Musar Sfarim, and then you have each chapter in that Musar Sefer is another midah. You can literally look at my father, and he's the walking Musar Sefer, because every single midah and how to exactly do that midah in the most purest, most sterling way, that was my father. But again, you're not born like that. So where does that come from? My father would always say this to me. I heard him say this to me many, many times. He would say that about his Rosh Hashiva, the person that he looked up to the most in this world, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha. He would say to me many times that after 120, when I go up to Shemayim, said, I don't think they're going to ask me, why weren't you like Rav Yaakov in learning? He said, because I'll be able to look at them and say, really, that's what you expect? Rav Yaakov, it's not possible. So they're not going to mun me for that. That's impossible. But what they will ask me is, why weren't you like Rav Yaakov in Midas? Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, he said, who had the whole world, the whole Klal Yisrael was on his shoulders, but always nice to everyone, the way he treated everyone. My father shared with us countless stories. I don't have time to go into all of them here. Personally, how my father treated him and treated my mother, cared about everyone. So my father said, that's something that we can all be, that we can all work towards. That's something, why can't we be nice to everyone? He said, that they're going to ask me about. So when you see the person in my father and the midas that he was, the person who, like I said, the finest person that you'll ever meet, it's because that's what he looked at. That's what he looked up towards. That's what he was trying to attain. That's who he trying his best to model himself after. And when that's how you live your life, then you see a person with those midas taivas. That's where it comes from. His whole life was around, I am going to try to be like Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky in midas. Who even thinks to even say, that's how I'm going to try to run my life? But that's how my father looked at it. And that was the second aspect. The third aspect was his Torah and his limud of Torah and his learning of Torah. It's been touched on by a few different people here already. But when I was in KOLLEL, my father would say to me all the time the following thing. Of course, he would tell me that he's proud of me. But then he would tell me, this is not where you are going to prove yourself. He said, one day you're going to go to work. And learning Torah all day is not going to be your job anymore as it is now. And life is going to get busier. And you're going to have to still find time within that busy day, within everything that's going on, still have to find time to learn. And if you do it then I'll know that what you're doing now is actually real. And he would say this to me over and over and over again. So, okay, he gave me this, okay, how do I go? What is the blueprint that I can follow to try to be like that when I reach that point? I didn't have to look far. All I had to do was just look at my father. Some of my youngest memories when we moved to Carmichael, I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. I still remember my father on Friday nights. Bumi Goldreich lived 3 doors down. Every Friday night they had a Seder together. One week they learned by our house. The other week they learned by their house. Every single Friday night. Rabbi Brabowski's shir, Rabbi Friedler's Minchas Chinuch shir, Rabbi Levy's shir here on Shabbos. In addition to all the time he spent on his own learning countless hours and all different things that he was learning all the time. And then, as was mentioned, the example that he then said on top of that and the blueprint that he gave was, he proved that when he talked about that when you're working, you have to try to find time, but then he took it to another level, because when he retired, as my brother mentioned, he went back to KOLLEL. That's what he basically did. 3 Siddharim a day. First in Babav in the morning, first Seder. Reb Shea, thank you so much. The way you were Mekayim, the way the younger light made him feel. He felt like he was, although he was much older than all the younger light, he felt like he was one of the guys. This mamish what he felt like. I would meet people from the KOLLEL all the time, all these young light. They would come over and talk to me about my father, and they were like his friends. And that's what he felt, and that's what they felt. And if you ever needed a sefer, the moment he got out of his seat, they would jump out of his seat, not make him get, not make him reach. They mamish made him feel, thank you so much. He loved going there, and when he wasn't able to the last few years, he missed it terribly. And then second Seder, the David Hof Seder. So he would come home after that first Seder, have a little lunch, maybe a few different things you have to take care of, some errands, a doctor's appointment, a little bit of a nap, and then running to Dirshu. Enjoyed this year so much when he was able to be here, and then when he was able to continue it on Zoom as well. It really meant so much to him. Yishav Nachas, your son, he loved your son's share as well. And then he came home after that and had supper, and off it was back to Shea. My mother and him would have their little, my mother, who wanted to take care of him so badly, wanted to make sure that he ate his whole supper because he really needs to stay healthy. And he would say, no, but I got to run to Shea. Those were the type of things that they fought about. And then he wouldn't miss the Shea for anything. And that was his night seder, first seder, second seder, night seder. The example that he gave me, the example that he gave all of us in the family of how to find time to learn when life is really busy. And then once you no longer have to do that anymore, once you no longer have to work, how to literally go back to KOLLEL. That's not much what he did. But with all that learning, the one thing on a personal level that stood up about that, which my brother also touched on, was when we were kids, every single night, there was not a single night that my father did not learn with us. We chazered whatever we learned that day. And every single Shabbos, even if we didn't have a test on Sunday, we had to chazer with him what we learned the entire week. And as a 7, 8, 9-year-old, there's some nights where you're hoping, okay, maybe daddy will be busy tonight, or maybe he'll forget. But that never happened. Every single night. Before he did whatever he did that night, it was always us first. And of course, my mother was a partner in that, because every time we would finish supper, my mother would say, he would want to help clean up. And she said, no, I got the kitchen. You just go learn with the boys. It was a pure partnership. And then it wasn't just, my brother touched on it a little bit, but he also understands when you're dealing with younger boys, not every night, you're 8 years old, you want to sit down and learn. You're in yeshiva all day, you want to just play. So he always found creative ways to make it that we would want to learn. He would say, okay, so let's learn. And as soon as we finish learning, we will go downstairs to the basement and then we'll play soccer for a little. Or maybe we'll play tabletop hockey for a few minutes. And once he said that, I was running to get my chumash or my mishnayos. Let's finish as quickly as we can so I can get to that. His example of not just his own learning, but how he showed us how valuable it was and how meaningful it was. And that was the person, and that was when I talk about the limud HaTorah and who he was, that was another example that really resonates with me and always did and always has and always will. The last piece, the fourth thing I want to mention, is the parent he was. Together with my mother, of course, in a full partnership, as I mentioned. But how much he cared, how much time he spent with us, how he cared about every detail of what was going on. Just wanted us to keep learning and keep steiging, and always act and always behave the right way. My father was not a man of many words, as you know, but if we said something or did something not nice, then we heard from him, and he made it very clear that it's not going to happen a second time. And that person, that parent, who, as you know, my father, for those that know him, not that he wasn't a social person, but his social life really didn't matter. It was the family. It was the children. That's what it was all about for him. Everything else was secondary to that. And that's exactly who he was, and that was the parent that he was. I'm grateful to have obviously had that parent for so many years. But at the same time, also, if we want to try to understand that, I really think that this fourth aspect, when we had talked about first the Lashon Hara, the Midas, and then the learning of Torah, and then I talk about the parent, this in a way is Oila al Gabeh, and not just personally because that was my father on a personal level, but because I think if you want to understand the parent that he was, it's those three pieces that I mentioned first is why he was the parent that he was. A person who does not care and want to hear anything or ever speak about anyone else. A person who perfected his midas to such a level that was unbelievable. A person that made limud HaTorah the essence of his life, but not just for himself. He made sure that he showed us how important it was and inculcated into us and learned with us. I had so many friends growing up whose fathers, everyone has different schedules, and their fathers weren't necessarily able to actually learn with them every single night. And when I was thinking some night that I wish my father wasn't available tonight so I can get a night off, my friends would tell me, you're so lucky that your father can learn with you every night because I wish my father could. You take all that, what he did, and then that feeds right into the parent that he was, the parent that he is, because everything he's teaching us will continue forever. And again, if we go back to where I started, all this that I talked about was in a person whose life was not supposed to be. And yet this is what this person became. This is what this person was. This is who my father was. Unbelievable. I'm the luckiest person in the world to have had such a father. I just want to end with 2 quick points, if I may. There was a Tehillim group, there was a WhatsApp group. I think my sister was the one that initiated it when my father first went into the hospital on Tainus Esther. It was family, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, cousins, as well as some friends that were on it as well. Thank you to everyone that took the time to say Tehillim. There was literally Tehillim being said sometimes even at 3 o'clock in the morning. I wouldn't be able to even count how many times Tehillim was said during these last 10 weeks. And I really want to say thank you because part of me almost feels all that Tehillim is why we had this bonus. That we had my father for another 10 weeks. And maybe, not maybe, I honestly believe that Tehillim gave us that extra gift of 10 more weeks with my father that we might have not had. But last night I was curious. So I took a look at what was the last kapitel that was said before we got the news, before someone wrote in that Tehillim WhatsApp group, Birth Dynamics, to let everyone know. And it was kapitel Samach Aleph. And then I went and said, let me look at the last pasuk, because that was the last pasuk that was said after who knows how many times Tehillim was said. And pasuk Tes, which is the last pasuk in kapitel Samach Aleph, says, Kain azamra shimcha la'ad l'shalmei nedarek kol yom. David HaMelech says, I'm going to sing HaKadosh Baruch, I'm going to sing your praises forever in order to repay my debt every single day. And I saw the pasuk and I froze for a moment because that was the last pasuk that was said right before. That was my father, the boy who went through the war, who lost his father, who could have had every excuse in the book, and yet never felt that way and never lived that way. It was all about being thankful to the Rebbeinu Shalom, but not just being thankful. It's easy to say thank you, but to live his life every single day in a way that showed how thankful he was, how he literally felt he's repaying a debt to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with the way he acted, with his midas, with the way he didn't speak about people, with his limud Torah, with the way he was as a father, as a husband, everything that he was. Literally, that pasuk is almost so apropos that pasuk sort of ended up being that last pasuk that was said in that Tehillim group after 10 weeks. And everyone's been talking about the Munkacher Rebbe's bracha. And it's an amazing, obviously, in our family, it's a wonderful story. And obviously, my father's here, and without that bracha, we don't know. So obviously, it means so much to us. But I want to add one little nakuda to that. It's one thing to get the bracha. It's another thing for the bracha to be Mekayim, and now he's born. But look what my father did with that bracha. Over 85 years where he did not waste that bracha a single day. He took that bracha and he blew it up into this unbelievable thing by the person he was, by the way he lived, almost as if he was thankful that that bracha occurred, and made sure I'm going to make sure every day to make that bracha literally keep becoming more and more, because as my father grew, the power of that bracha alongside it keeps growing alongside it as well. And we all know that my father has the name of the Minchas Elazar, Chaim Elazar. My father's first name was Chaim. In Chaim el Torah. And there's 2 ways that we could look at it. In Chaim el Torah, that there's no life without Torah, and my father certainly lived that way. Your whole life is Torah, and that's how we live. But in Chaim el Torah, there is no Chaim without Torah. My father, who he was, they're one and the same. They're intertwined forever. That's how my father lived his life. In Chaim el Torah, one without the other doesn't exist. They are mutually coexisting, and they were and have been every single day of my father's life. The person who wasn't supposed to be ended up living a life of absolute perfection. I just want to say first a few quick thank yous. First of all, to my mother, who was my father's partner. This has been discussed every step of the way. Very simply put, Shali v'shalach shalahem. Myself and all of us, the children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, who we are, it's yours. It's what you and Daddy did all these years. It's what you continue to do and what you continue to be doing through the examples and through the lessons, his lessons that will live on forever, and your example that we are still so lucky and zeicha to have. To my sister, Shani, her husband, Chesky, my brother, Yumi, and my sister-in-law, KOLLEL. Thank you so much for these last 10 weeks. And I know, Yumi, you mentioned me, but you guys it was easy for me. I'm here. But what you guys did these last 10 weeks. setting your lives aside in all different ways to be able to be here as much as you can, and even from a distance when you weren't able to, still being involved. On a personal note, I want to say thank you because you made it a whole lot easier for me, but of course, so greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. And to the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren as well, some of them are here today. Thank you to all of you. The Tehillim, the well wishes, you also had a part in all of this, and thank you so much. To Bernadette, who I believe is upstairs, and to her husband is here as well. She's been my father's support worker for the last few years. I guess she's kind of become family. She treated my father like literally her own father, and her husband as well, who was involved in so many aspects of it. Thank you to both of you. We really appreciate it beyond words, and you'll always be family. Thank you. To Sunnybrook Hospital, the VCICU, the D2 ward, but I think more specifically, or most specifically, the D4 ICU, where my father spent about 8 or 8.5 weeks over these last 10 weeks. The staff there, the nurses, the doctors, every single one of them, not just their competency, which of course they're great at what they do, and they don't need my affirmation of that. But how much they cared. Every single one treated my father like it was their father. How nice they were to us. They literally jokingly almost became friends because they were just so wonderful, and we will always be grateful for that. To Mrs. Shelley Botnick as well, who I called her and reached out to so many times over these last 10 weeks, the guidance, the wisdom, the calming voice in what was a time that was anything but calm. We are eternally grateful for that. To Rav Daniel Finkel, who I touched on it before, but my father loved you. You know that. He didn't just love you because of the shir you gave, which is amazing, but he loved you as a person. He loved the entire shir. It was his chiyas to go, and the way the Olam treated him. And yes, maybe I shouldn't say it publicly, but I won't disclose the name, but a little birdie did tell me, Rav Daniel, that you had mentioned to him that if not for my father still being on the Zoom or on the phone, then you might have shut down the Zoom at some point. But you said as long as Rav Chaim is there, it's not going away. Thank you so much. He literally looked forward to it every single day, the whole day. And it was a highlight of his evening, especially over these last few years when he wasn't able to go out. As I mentioned already, but I'll quickly again, to Reb Shea, Fira, and the entire KOLLEL. Thank you so much. Like I said, I gave my father absolute fears. He looked forward to it, enjoyed going every single day. And I neglected to mention, I should, his Chavrusa Benny Feintach, who was there. I didn't mention him with the other Chavrusa, so Benny Feintach as well. My father enjoyed learning with him so much in Bathurst every single morning. And last but not least, to Rabbi Lowy and Rebbetzin Lowy. Thank you, first of all, Rabbi Lowy, from speaking from afar today. It's really appreciated. And thank you for coming by yesterday before you left town. We really appreciate it. But really for the last over 40 years now. The Rav you've been, the Rebbetzin you've been, to my father, to my mother, of course, to myself as well, but to my parents specifically, and how meaningful, how much you mean to them, and how they feel about you, and everything you always did for them, and how they always felt that closeness all the years. Thank you so much for that and for everything that you brought to our family. And that sort of dovetails into the last thing I'm going to thank, which is the room I'm standing in. Yes, of course, thank you to everyone that came today, but to the room that's to this room and to the people in this room that are part of the Agudah. It's the only place I've ever known. From my youngest memories of coming to shul are in the room right behind us. My father was in the Agudah all my whole life. He loved the shul. He loved the people. He loved everything the shul represented, the learning, the davening, the ashkafa, everything it was. And it was his life. And he talked about it all the time. So thank you to the shul and everyone that's part of the shul. It meant so much to him. I just want to end by asking Mechila on behalf of myself, and if there's anyone in the family that wants to be included in that, I have you in mind. I don't think it's possible to have ever given my father the proper cover that he deserves. I don't think that's possible, but I tried, but I definitely have to ask Mechila if there are moments or times where I didn't, or certainly never rose to the level for sure that he deserves. You should go forward, Daddy, from here. It should be a Melis Yasher for Mommy, for the entire family, for the shul you love, for the community, for the whole Toronto, for all of Klal Yisrael, because I know for sure, I know where you are right now. You're in the highest places. You're right near HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I am sure that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will listen to anything that you have to say. We should be zeicher to only simchas in the future. I mentioned Hashem, we should be zeicher to Gula Shleim of Meher Binyomin. Amen. Thank you.
Please, I'm embarrassed to stand here. To be maspid, an anak, a giant, Echad Mechabura, survivor of Gehenim of the previous door, together with the Satmarov. But Chazal teach us, Echad Mechabura Shemeis, Yidagu Kol HaChabura. He wasn't just Echad, he was Achad. He was Mufchosh Bechabura. He said once that maybe I taught him Torah, but in reality the opposite was true. Chaim, you were our Rebbe in so many ways. Well before Corona, you really, I don't recall missing a share. The Kavati Iton was a true Kavati Iton Torah. And when you were no longer able to drive, your devoted wife drove you and someone from the Olam took you home. Your concentration was intense. You seldom lifted your head out of the Gemara. And when you spoke softly but with tremendous clarity. Around 10 years ago, there's a difficult mathematical Gemara. You wrote out an entire sheet. All the cheshbonis, a kur, a lesech, a saw, shkolim, dinorim, with such clarity. I keep it in my jaw. Ad hayom hazeh. Everyone knew that Yankov Kamenetsky, the Chetzal Kevocha, loved you. You were classmates of Rabbi Shmuel Belsky. And after not seeing him for over 50 years, when he came to Toronto, Reb Chaim, you went over to him. And Reb Belsky asked, Irving, you are our role model for the entire share of complete menuchas hanefesh and simcha when you're involved in the Blat Gemara. Reb Chaim, we're really not sure. Perhaps your Ben Odom Chaver was even greater than your Ben Odom Mokim. You never, to my knowledge, spoke a sharp word to anyone. You greeted everyone with a genuine smile. Whoever did you a favor was lucky. He was thanked repeatedly and many times was given a gift. Your prayer was pure. We never heard a complaint from you, never. Even when the dialysis started and it was Ephes, koyach, you had no koyach, you apologized if you were late. If you were late on the Zoom. The words of David HaMelech, Choylech Tomim Upel Tzedek V'doive Emes B'Vavoi, Lo Yirogal Al Shoynoi Lo Yosu L'Re'eu Ro, are extremely appropriate. You, Reb Chaim, you had a tremendous schus. You came with your whole family to our siyum. Your presence gave the siyum a whole different meaning. Last night, I rewatched the divrei bracha that you spoke. Abba Yisai, it's Ad Lahafli. You taught us a lesson, what to do with your extra time. You encouraged us to take projects, make goals in learning, set a schedule that you could keep and keep it. Chaim, one of your projects was the kelim of the Beis Hamikdash, the dimensions of the Beis Hamikdash. You also love to learn Gemara Nedarim with the Ran, you mentioned. I had the feeling last night that you spoke like as I watched it, and like a Navi of old, showing us what one could accomplish in his retirement. We have as a current of you every Shabbos now at home. The beautiful vase, the Yunya Eishes Chayil, the bottle Chaim bought for us to the Siyam. It graces our Shabbos table every week with flowers. That's a current I hope will continue to elevate us, to follow your footsteps. Divrei Chachomim, Benachas Neshmoyim. It's hard to say goodbye. Echad Mechabura, you'll surely be missed. Truly one can say, Ani B'tzedek Echze Panecha. To the family, to Mrs. Sussman, your brother Chaim, Moishy, and the rest of the family, Schori Harbe Ma'oid, Moishy Akibed, Aveim, is something that's an example for all of us. Yehi Zichrei Baruch.
Are only the most amazing, happy, and special experiences. The idea was someone who imbued compassion, calmness, and respect. His patience and love we felt as little children till today is something that can't fully be explained into words. To this day, I can still feel his arms wrapped around my sister Tova and I as he was reading us 20 books on their couch while we carefully avoided the sharp edges of the coffee table. Going to Bubi and Zaidi's house every Yontif was a treat that was filled with excitement, as we know how warm and welcoming Bubi and Zaidi was. I've learned so much of my midos from watching how he behaved consistently, and I try to instill it into my children. My oldest son, Rafi, when he heard yesterday that Zaidi was nifter, he was crying hysterically on his bed. And he's barely met him. And he was saying how Zaidi was the biggest tzaddik that he's ever known. And he is going straight up to Olam Haba. And we all know that he's right. This week's parsha is Parshas Bamidbar. Bamidbar means traveling into the wilderness or into the desert. And it signifies a period of transition and growth of Kol Yisrael. Zaidi was someone that was always growing and respectful throughout his entire life. As we begin to transition of not having him here in this world, we will continue to keep his values in our lives and hope to continue to give nachas to our parents, to Bubi, and to all of Kol Yisrael. Thank you.
Emole Rachamim. Shoichei Miroimi. Amitzei. Amitzei Manuchon Lechavayna Abo. Alikanefeh Yashechino. B'malais kedoshim v'tahayirim kizoyar arakiya mazirim zabim b'yom zeh shalach v'yoyelo v'abomoy b'avo Shea kol kodesh zevli nadeyatem tzedakah b'balad kolat nishmas boy biganede beimnu khosai lochei olachamim. Yatirei v'zei legnababli yavoyela. Tzora Chaim es nishmasoi. Adonai unachlosoi v'niach misham hamishkavoi. V'noi mar omer.
Anyone can make the today around 4 o'clock today. During the week, Chakras on Sunday, the Shlita is at 8 o'clock. During the week at 7:30, and then all of them are at 8:30. Last picture is usually Agudah feld. Agudah feld best to take the road person. You always go in from Shah State to the north. Women are not going to the feld.
Keep it. Usually 100 people. Everyone walks in, you never gonna believe this. Shea is there, I think it's his daughter. Boo.
Yeah.
Shea, Boo is in town. Shea told him she's making 50 yes.
The other.
Boo was like, don't tell him anything. He walked in, I'm like, huh? And he said when I spoke, I said, I can't tell us anything because there's two Talmudim in the father who grew up in my house. And Boo said that there's nothing you can tell us. It's all. I'm gonna go give Elazar.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna go outside. Do it.
Come with us.
For all those who are still on Zoom, we are not going to be bringing any pictures from the feld, but we will be Malava outside.
Yeah, my sister-in-law has a weekend. Okay, so I have it. Both sides, right?
There's not anything last week.
No, why?
Didn't come, it wasn't inside.
Why was it inside?
Because there was a client, they wanted the client to come inside, his son-in-law. It's again on behalf of the family, the Kevura Kadisha, and Gillis, Agudah Yisrael, and I thank all of you who joined in on Zoom to give Kavod Achron to come, Elazar Sussman. Although you were kind of somewhat the midst of Levaya, there's always Nichum Avelim as well. There's his family will be sitting at 92 Carmichael. The phone numbers for each oval is listed in the post, so please contact them. We should have simchas, have a good Shabbos, and a good Mefredash. Thank you.